Hello, everyone. It is Derrick Young here, host and founder of Flower Boys. We are here for our second episode, and I'm so excited because we have someone who is absolutely phenomenal. For you all who do not know, Flower Boys is a series that we are talking to queer and gay people about their experiences of shaping our nation. And so we have scholars, authors, entertainers who are going to sit down with me for this series and talk about not only themselves, but also our ancestors who's paved the way for the LGBTQ community over generations. And so I am so excited today to have Robert Reid-Pharr with us. Thank you so much for being here, Robert.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm so glad. You got to tell us the backdrop. Tell us your story.
I'm from North Carolina. Okay. I am from Charlotte. I'm from some regular black family, middle-class black family in Charlotte. I went to the University of North Carolina and did not want to go because 20 people from my high school went to the University of North Carolina. It was fantastic. It was a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah.
And so I also became, while I was there, the president of the Carolina Gay Association. The big thing that I did while I was there was that I helped to change the name to the Carolina Gay and Lesbian Association.
Okay.
And so that introduced me to a whole range of people who went on to be hugely important in my life, including a bunch of people who have now become sort of seminal people in terms of Black LGBTQ history. Essex Hempel, Barbara Smith, Gil Gerald. I was a sophomore or a junior in 1986. And I spent a semester interning for the National Coalition of Black Gays. And helped to organize their conference, their national conference in St. Louis, Missouri that year. So I was able to meet Ray Melrose and Asado Saint and just the whole range of folks who have now become really central to the way that we think about Black queer life in the United States today.
So
I became the sort of little brother of a bunch of those people.
So you have to tell me in the 80s, for a lot of us, I was born in 93.
Right.
And so when I think about the challenges that we have being Black, queer, lesbian now, we think it was much different. Do you think it was much different in the 80s than it is now?
Definitely. When I was a kid, there was definitely this more sort of pioneer sense. However, there were lots of Black folks and LGBTQ people of all types very, very, very active from the time that I was an adult and really from the time of my late teens on. So I don't know, I think the sort of mainstreaming of the movement happened over time, but the volume of the movement and the feistiness of it and the power of it have always seemed to be sort of fever pitched my entire life. And you have to remember, I came into my own as an adult right as the AIDS crisis was peaking. And so there was never a moment at which people were not literally fighting for their lives and also literally just no nonsense about getting things done.
Exactly.
You know, so that's the world that I entered, you know, a world that was just intense in terms of issues around gender and sexuality. The thing that surprises me is that it has never slowed down, frankly. It's just always continued to grow and to explode.
Well, rightfully so, because we still got a long way to go. And so, I mean, you know this concept of Flower Boys. So this is actually the painting there, Flower Boys. And one of the things that I really want to hone in on is I feel personally that a lot of gay folks, a lot of gay men, we do a lot for people. We are always the ones who step up, always the one who's trying to advocate not only for us, but for everybody else and everybody else's issues. And so the concept of Flower Boys is that so many of us give our flowers to society, but do society really give us our flowers? Why do you think as gay men, we oftentimes do more for others than we do for ourselves?
The question that you're asking is about self-care. And I think for everybody who is 1 second younger than me, who is Black and gay or Latino, Asian, Native, white, queer, whatever, I now give you as an elder permission to take good damn care of yourself and to enjoy life and to laugh and have joy and to have fun and to imagine yourself old as hell and enjoying it and to do everything that you need to do in order to be that person. So that's the first part of the question. The second part of it is that means that you've got to do a lot of work that you're never going to get thanked for. Ever going to get thanked for. And so you got to stop waiting for other folks to fill in, to give you that basket or to say these things are going to happen for you. You got to start taking care of yourself,
right?
As well as you can now.
Yeah,
you really can. You can't wait to do the self-care, and you can't wait to contribute to other people.
Right.
And anybody who says that they figured out how to do that is lying. All I'm saying to you is that you don't have to make the self-care second.
Right.
You don't.
Do you feel like...
And part of your responsibility is to be old.
Exactly.
You know, part of your responsibility is to last. Part of your responsibility is to grow. Part of your responsibility is to see that your garden is continuing to prosper. Part of your responsibility is to live long enough so that you're happy to be forgotten.
Exactly.
Because your things that you have created live for you.
Right.
So, you know, making sure that you don't drug and drink too much, that you find the types of communities that you want, that you take care of your body, that you take care of your spirit, that you take care of your housing, get your finances together, and you deal with mom and daddy and all of them, and whomever is in your life, either bringing joy or strife, that you deal with all of that. Yes, you got to do that.
Yeah.
But you got to do it with laughter and the sense that, oh my gosh, 10 years from now, I want to be happy.
Exactly.
And a little fatter. And in 30 years, I want to be happier and fatter.
Exactly.
You know.
Have you always had that mindset?
No. It's one of the things I think in that's really deeply problematic, including in culture that thinks of itself as queer and radical, is it is very age phobic. It is very, very, very age phobic.
That's true.
And the idea is somehow that there's nothing to be gained.
Right.
And a lot to be gained about getting older is peace of mind.
I turned 30 this year. And I do feel like each year I'm getting better. And so I'm excited to continue to age, right? I get more wiser. I meet more people. I am learning more to prioritize myself and prioritize my self-care. How do you feel?
Can I say one thing? You also have to enjoy your work.
That's true.
If you're doing your work, if you're doing your activism or you're doing your creative work or you're doing your this and your that, and you don't get lost in it, if you don't find joy in it, if you're not laughing about it, if you're not running to it, at least sometimes, you're doing the wrong stuff. You're not helping anybody.
That's so true. That's so true. So speaking of work, what do you do for work?
Oh, that's mean. That's a mean question. I am a professor by trade and training, and I'm a literary and cultural critic.
Okay, awesome. So right now, at this time, stamped May 2023. So you're a professor at Harvard.
Right.
And you've been there for a while. What has been your experience as a Black queer man
at Harvard?
In Harvard,
I will say this. I'll make the big announcement. I'm leaving Harvard and going to New York University. This is my last semester. I know. So I've been there 5 years. I'll say that my experience has mainly been quite wonderful.
Okay.
I like my species. I like human beings. Once I recognize that you're a human being, I'm going to try to be nice to you. And people respond to that. I respond to, pointy-headed people quite well.
Right.
And I also like students. I'm a good teacher.
Okay.
I respond to good students.
I can tell students really like you too.
One of the reasons I'm leaving Harvard is that they've been I've very much succeeded there and they've been very good to me. But I do worry a lot about the ways in which interdisciplinary stuff around gender and sexuality is supported sort of, not just at the same levels of more conservative things.
I mean, I guess that would make sense because you are the first professor.
I'm the first person tenured in studies of women, gender, and sexuality at Harvard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now
there's
a person. More than just you.
There's a person coming up through the ranks who's an associate professor and doing super well.
How did you get into that space? I mean, to be a scholar and one of the best scholars on gender and sexuality and women.
How did I do it?
Yeah, I mean, what's
the story?
Yeah, what's the story? What intrigued you to do that?
I wish that I could give you a clear story about honest business. I was graduating from the University of North Carolina. I sort of was good at school and sort of was interested in Black stuff and gender stuff. And I just wasn't done with my education. I knew that. So I got an MA in African American Studies at Yale. And I sort of wasn't done with my studies and stayed and got a PhD in American Studies. It was not until I was well into getting a PhD that it dawned on me that I would become a professor. It never really dawned on me. I just didn't know any professors. Right. I didn't know that was a profession you could be. And so it took me a minute to enter into it. Now, here's the good side of that.
Okay.
Part of the reason I've enjoyed it is because I had to learn the rules sort of from the bottom up. I didn't, therefore, know exactly the limits of where you could go.
Exactly.
I've always been driving outside of the lines. And a lot of times I just have been doing stuff that I really should not have been doing, or thinking things I should not have been thinking, or examining things that I should not have been examining. Just because nobody told me where the limits were. I wrote a book on early African American literature as the first thing I wrote, and then I wrote a collection of essays called Black Gay Men and published it in 2001. I was at Johns Hopkins at the time, the most conservative English department in the country.
Right.
Nobody was happy to have their only junior assistant professor write a book called Black Gay Men. Nobody.
Yeah.
However, that book really, probably more than anything, solidified my brand,
right,
and allowed me to move forward in ways that I had not imagined before.
Robert, I want to talk a little bit about love.
Oh no.
Yes.
All right, let's hear it.
It's a big topic, in our community, and so many folks feel like gay men can't love each other, or can't sustain relationships and so forth.
Right.
And so I want to know, just throughout your life, whether it's your personal experiences or like your friends and so forth, what have you seen in terms of the need to normalize Black gay love?
Right.
And is it something that's there and society is just not showing it, or are we really having a challenge?
I think that, as far as I can tell, when people talk about gay love, LGBTQ love,
right,
very often what they're talking about is couples.
Right.
And so I just don't really have a lot to say to that. I have no idea what the mechanics of how to have a one-to-one couple last from the time you meet at 25 until the time that one of you dies at 95.
Right.
I understand that people want that.
Right.
But that is one type of love. I can tell you the truth of the matter, though, is that if you start talking about love as a set of practices that people perform to each other, I know no one who is well, who is not being smothered in love all the time. And I don't mean, oh my gosh, occasionally somebody calls. I mean that all the time somebody is complimenting you and doing something sweet for you and saying a little prayer for you and touching you and making sure that you're okay. And some of those people are your friends, and some of those people are your neighbors, and some of those people are hopefully your lovers, people with whom you're physically intimate, or some of those people are people with whom you are married, perhaps, or a person with whom you are married. However, I think you have to get past the idea that you can find all of that thing that is called love, which is the universe, in a single person.
It goes back to that self-love, too.
You got to have self-love, and if you want to be loved, you got to go out and do it. And you want to be loved, you got to go out and have care for some people, regardless of what the expectation back is.
Yeah.
And you have to understand love as not something that is simply sparked, but something that grows. It does not grow in your time.
Exactly.
It grows. It's when you water the plant, you wait for the plant to wait for the plant to grow.
Exactly.
And if you're lonely, go touch someone right now. Go touch a person right now and say, "I'm lonely. I want to spend some time with you." It's just that simple.
Exactly. And oftentimes they may be lonely too.
We're all lonely.
We're all lonely. We are.
If you're a human being, and you're not feeling loneliness at some time of the day, baby, what's wrong with you?
Exactly.
How is that possible? If you're a human being, you're not feeling rage at some point in the day, how's that possible? If you're not feeling sad in some part of the day, how's that possible? If you don't have those things, if you don't have those emotions, then how do you know when love comes?
Exactly. That's powerful.
So, I just say be open to it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much. All right, so look, we've learned that you're phenomenal. We appreciate that.
I don't know.
Do you think you're phenomenal?
I think that I am individual. I think that I am in my lane.
Okay.
And I think that I'm unbelievably good at my lane.
Okay.
And it surprises people.
Yeah.
To see me riding my bicycle in my lane. And they think, how is this guy riding his bicycle in his lane? And he's not, look, I'm all wavy, I'm happy.
Exactly.
I'm eating a snack secretly. And
too many people worried about everybody else.
I'm just riding my lane.
So, you are a scholar on someone who is very dear to me. James Baldwin.
Right.
Some people call James Jimmy.
Right.
How do you connect with James Baldwin?
When I was 14, so we had a field trip from Charlotte, where I'm from, to Raleigh, the state capital. It was the first time I'd been on a college campus and the first time I'd been to a college library. And there was a copy there of Go Tell It on the Mountain. And it was the first time I saw a book with a black person on it. And so I bought the book. And so I bought the book and I read it. And I was already reading lots. And so it changed my life. I didn't know that books could be written about black people. Certainly not normal, regular black people that I knew and understood. It really moved me. And so that was one of the things that turned me on to literature, reading and writing, and changed my life. Now, fast forward decades later, I'm a professional literary and cultural critic. And the former president of the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, he came to me and he said, Robert, I'd like to take you for a drink. We went out for a drink, and he said, he had become the director of the research libraries of the New York Public Libraries. He said to me that we're just about to buy the James Baldwin collection. I think that you should take a look at these papers. And I went and saw this amazing cache of materials. And then I'll say to you that the thing that I've gotten stuck with is African-American people are people obsessed with the fact that our history has been stolen from us, that we're not represented in archives. And yet I come into this moment in which this black and gay man has, it's 77 cubic feet and thousands and thousands and thousands of documents and lots and lots and lots of interviews and lots and lots of film footage. Right. And so for me, as a person who's interested in black archives, remember I began as an 18th century person, the earliest black writing, and have been doing that type of work my entire career. For a person who's interested in archives, it's the thing that, it's heartbreaking. You can't believe that you have this amount of material in front of you to use. Right. And so it's been both unbelievably pleasurable and unbelievably frustrating. It just takes a long time to do. Yeah. So I'm a fan of James Baldwin, but because of my true respect for him, I've sort of been careful to sort of bracket the fandom. Do you know what I'm saying? To be very pointy-headed about how I'm dealing with materials. Hopefully to write beautifully about it, but to be pointy-headed about it as well.
Okay. Well, I need to hear the pointy answer. Who would you say James Baldwin is?
Look, I think that the thing that strikes me, the question that I've been asking myself intellectually, is James Baldwin is now one of the most quoted persons in the English language, frankly, and also, for example, one of the most quoted people on Twitter. The research question for me is, look, how does this black and gay, very poor, dark-skinned, small man become the sort of one of the real icons of the left in this country?
Right. What would you say in terms of his achievements in his contributions to African-American culture, African-American literature, in terms of the current context?
James Baldwin is the person who turns the African-American novel somewhat away from the hard-boiled sort of realist fiction of Richard Wright and towards a much more a sort of wordy, poetic style that we see having influenced so much of future writing, particularly writing by black feminists. So I don't think you can get to Toni Morrison without having gotten to James Baldwin.
Exactly.
I really don't. I know you can.
Right.
And so that's really where we are. And on top of it, part of the reason that we're talking about James Baldwin is that he is a touchstone for gender and sexuality studies. Part of what you're talking about is that he was so fey, and so fiery and fierce. And that person, remember, he took it in the teeth for that.
Right.
But that person, decades later, is a person who we rightly celebrate and think, wow, look at this queer misbehave.
Exactly.
I get it why people are so excited about it. My gift that I can bring to it is that I can be cool about actually understanding the mechanics of that performance, and explain how it works and look at it over time, in a way that that other people imagine it as coming from boom that moment.
Exactly.
When in fact you see this person having been trained over many years and having trained himself over many years, and I think that story is a more dull story to tell, but I think the more important story.
You have this era with James Baldwin, but you also had some folks like Bayard Rustin.
Right.
Were they friends? Did they have a friend group?
I don't think that Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin actually, I have not seen any evidence of their communicating with each other. I think that the way that James Baldwin writes movingly about Martin King and about Malcolm X, who he did consider friends.
Right.
I haven't seen evidence of their hanging out though.
Okay.
There's evidence of their being in the same rooms with each other and having discussed things with each other.
Do you know if he had many friends?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, loads. Oh yeah. You know, one of the things I think, you know, about James Baldwin is he's super social. You know, so 1 billion people knew him and liked to party with him. He was a big social, you know, center of attention man. You know, tiny little man who totally stole every room.
Take up space.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting because there's a whole question of whether or not James Baldwin's had long-term sexual or romantic relationships. There's several that we know about.
Okay.
It seems to me that the actual letters that you see and the people who are strong in his life over time are friends. You know, the biggest one would be, this will be the shock to you, the person who I think is most represented in the James Baldwin archives in terms of correspondence is a woman named Mary Painter. Mary Painter was a white American woman from the Midwest, upper class, who met James Baldwin along with his lover at the time, Lucien Heppersberger, and they maintained a tight relationship, girlfriends, for many, many, many years.
Okay.
And Mary Painter certainly loaned James Baldwin money, took his mail, saw to his health, saw to his mental health, and really was a person who loved him and whom he loved.
Right.
All these dudes are coming in and out. Several dudes have come in and out. But the white lady, you know, with the person, and then let's go have drinks and talk it through, is there through the whole time. I think we have to pay attention to that and celebrate it. You know, and love him for loving her, love her for loving him.
From what I see, when I look at a lot of leaders back in the day, of course they had very inclusive networks and so forth, but James Baldwin was very much so clear, really plugged into the white community, really just plugged in everywhere. How do you think that impacted the way he navigated spaces? I mean, he spoke so forcefully in terms of like Black liberation and like the power of Black folks, but then he was often seen with white folks.
Well, and white folks and Black folks and everybody.
Right.
Look, here's the deal. You know, James Baldwin leaves for France in 1948, more or less returns in 1957. But in truth, even though he's a lot in the U.S. after 1957, is very, very associated with the civil rights movement, he dies in France. You know, and the home that is most associated with him is the home at Saint-Paul-de-Vence. And so he never really goes back to those Harlem roots that we're imagining him to have.
Basically, yeah.
And I don't really, you know, I'll say this to you. I think I don't have an answer to the question because it doesn't bother me that much. It just doesn't bother me that much.
No, I feel it. Like, you know, I'm definitely one of those people. My network is very inclusive. And I think that you need everybody if you want to make change, if you want to build a movement. I think from what I can tell, Baldwin knew that and he embraced that. So that's what I appreciate.
James Baldwin goes to visit at Howard University, J. Saunders Reading maybe, and he says to him, look, Paris is where you need to go to write, go to Paris and write. Your job to the race is to not write 2 or 3 books, it's to write a shelf full of books and to make them fantastic. If that's where you have to go do that, that's where you have to go do that.
Exactly.
And I understand that. One of the things that James Baldwin said a lot about going to Paris in 1948 is that part of the reason he went is because he didn't speak French. And he wanted the silence of it. I fully get that. He wanted the ability to be in a location where he wasn't hearing the insult, and he wasn't hearing other people's way of handling the English language. He did not really speak French until 2 years after living there. And so he lived really in a silent environment for him. And he also liked it that as a Black person walking around Paris, the Parisians would very well let him die on the street, but that itself was a gift. You know, he could just be left alone. And I understand that as a creative person. The desire to, it's not that you're necessarily, you sometimes need time to just hear what you think and feel what you feel versus especially if you're a Black person, you're being told all the time, Black and gay person, you're being told all the time what you should think and feel and the way that you should express it. I know that part of his long years abroad were about that, that sense of needing to, searching for quiet.
And so, you know, there are people out there that critique him for going to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say are some of like the key debates or controversies that Baldwin received or his life received from most people?
Look, people will say about both James Baldwin and Richard Wright, who was also in Paris at the same time, that they became detached from the root of what we African American culture because of their long years abroad. That may be true. I don't know that it matters that much. At this point, I think it probably hurt James Baldwin. I know that it did, but I think that a writer who is being real and who is not rustling people's feathers is probably not doing his or her or their job.
Yeah. Well, I love James Baldwin. As I said, I know I have a lot to learn, and I'm learning a lot from you right now. Who else would you say around that time that people may not know about? Like
Chesterheims. Go read Chesterheims.
Okay.
Go read Chesterheims.
Okay.
I was going to write a biography of Chesterheims.
Okay. Tell me more.
Lawrence Jackson wrote a fantastic biography of Chesterheims, so thank God I did not do that.
Yes.
Chesterheims is a very, very famous crime fiction writer and a person who wrote two amazing autobiographies. A black heterosexual, hard-boiled, difficult to read writer, one of the finest writers of the mid-20th century. People is really underestimated. Also a Francophile, also a person who met James Baldwin in Paris. I find Chesterheims fascinating.
So, what do you feel, your vantage point, what is the mandate in our society right now?
Resilience. Resilience.
Say more.
Get over the idea, the final days, tomorrow is not going to be the final day.
Exactly.
Next week is not going to be the final day. I think one of the things that I really fret about is, especially in social media, and the nastiness with people, the way that people treat each other, as if this conversation is the last conversation you're ever going to have.
Right.
Is this idea that we either resolve everything this minute, and you either agree with me at this minute, or you're a traitor to our species and there's nothing else to do.
Right.
When I say resilience, I also mean that you and I are the descendants of the enslaved.
Right.
And so how the fuck are you going to sit up here and talk about, oh my gosh, Donald Trump said, talk some shit about my people.
Right.
If you really believe that you are you're the dream of enslaved persons.
Exactly.
Get your ass up. Take care of yourself. Remember that people died in 300 years of enslavement on this continent.
Right.
For you, and prayed and did their little voodoo and all the stuff that they did.
Right.
Get your ass up and continue to move. And no, you may not reach the beloved community, but you know what? You are part of the movement, and you're part of the movement of our species forward. Be resilient and be joyful in it. I'm an atheist, but I was raised a Pentecostal.
Okay.
But I believe in faith. I believe in faith. We are going to win because we have no choice but to win.
Exactly.
That's the way that goes.
Yeah. I mean, and most people would say for people of color, for LGBTQ folks, that we've embodied resilience for a very long time, right?
Hell yeah.
And so, are you still speaking to everybody, or are you saying?
Yeah. I'm speaking to everybody.
Everybody. Okay.
I'm speaking to everybody.
Okay.
Everybody. And by resilience, I'm not saying, oh my God, your back needs to hurt more.
Right.
I'm actually saying, oh my God, deal with that damn backache right now.
Right.
And especially people tend to think it's when you're ancient and you're 25 or you're ancient and you're 35 that your time is up. You got a lot more years, and you better. If the win often takes longer than you think, and any win that's going to last, any win that's going to be resilient takes longer.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. Versus the moment that is actually about the sort of burning the house down. Sometimes the house needs to burn down, and I believe in protest. I really do. But I also think that people need to start thinking about what types of institutions are you going to build? What happens with the fact that there's all this anti-LGBTQ stuff that's going to continue? You going to give up right now?
Exactly.
And you think those folks are going to give up?
Right.
And also you think that the only way to win is through the frontal attack without trying to use some of your soft skills as well. Resilience. Let's win. And by the way, here's what the left and progressive people need to do. We need to win for all of us.
For all of us, yeah.
We're all in this together, including the people who are presumably who people would like us to believe are our enemies.
Exactly. And so I want to dig a little deeper there. And so, we have to be resilient. We have to challenge these systems. Let's talk about like at home, right? So when I'm thinking about a lot of queer folks particularly when we talk about even Christianity and like black queer folks, First, if you don't mind sharing your story, would love to hear like how your family dealt with you coming out as a queer man.
Right.
But then also the mandate for our families to accept and embrace us as Black gay men.
I came out to my family in the 80s.
Okay.
Fire and brimstone crying, the whole thing. But here's the thing. Then there was day 2. And day 202.
Right.
And day 1002. And so part of what family means is, the way that we image family is it's all Hallmark card. Right, but basically families argue a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
And so I think that the thing that I took from my family, and both my parents are now passed away, but by the time my father and mother had died, we couldn't have been closer. And I think that sort of thing of, oh my gosh, you're the gay son of this conservative traditional family, and you say I'm a gay person, and they freak out. Right. But I still was their son, and I really do have a lot of those conservative values too. So I was never going to abandon them; they were never going to abandon me. And so we had to find room and space for that. Yeah. And we both had to grow. Their growth process affected very strongly my growth process. Right. My growth process affected theirs. And so they changed, and I changed. Right. But part of what they needed to know from me as well was they hated the idea that this was going to be, they would have never said queer, but this is a queer person this queerness is going to take our son away from us. Exactly. And it didn't. It was like, what, I'm still right here. And that changed things over time, really quite drastically. Yeah. And I think that, that is, again, movement means that you're trying to not only move yourself, but you're trying to move the people around you, if only a little bit. Exactly. And if you're not willing to have that fight with your intimates, then you're not in movement. You're in some type of therapeutic practice, and a thin one. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I feel like when I think about my family, so I came out when I was 16 years old. And, I didn't necessarily come out. I was like brought out. My dad set me down like, hey, some of your friends are strange looking. So is there something you want to tell me? And went down a rabbit hole, eventually told him. And so my dad passed away 4 years ago. And we were still in that phase of, we were growing. Like you said, we were growing for sure. Like, he loved my partner, Jonathan. We started to talk more. We still really weren't talking about my sexuality at all, which I didn't need to. However, I do feel that sometimes those situations happen. Like his death was completely unexpected for my family. And so now there's this area was like, could we have been really closer? Would he have continued to embrace me? Right. I'm not sure, but I do see in my mother a huge growth. She's just, absolutely amazing. And I think, it's challenging for a lot of folks who are in that early phase of their process, knowing like, will their families ever accept them? Like I think, young folks who reach out to me all the time, like, hey, I just came out and, my parents treated me this way, and they feel like just all hope is lost. And so I'm glad to hear your story. Time changes things. Yeah. And your needs change over time. That's true. And their needs change over time. You don't always need that. So Robert, tell me, what do you want to be remembered for? Well, for one thing, I am, part of my spiritual thing is that I think that at some point, I think all of us have to embrace being forgotten. And one of the things about working as a celebrity is that I think that even when you remember the name of the individual, you always forget the person ultimately. So when you say the name William Shakespeare, no human being comes to your mind right now. You're remembering just the name. Right. And so one of the things I hope to do as a person, the thing I say to myself every day is to keep the path clear. So my job is to make sure that no matter what I do, that I keep the door open for people who may not know that I've ever was there. I own a house that's 116 years old. I'm the third owner, and I don't know the owners, but I'm very careful in the house to do things in the house that will make it nice for the next people who will come. So that's a strong belief on my part, to have my humility be that someday my name will be forgotten. or that even if the name lasts, they'll forget this person attached to it. That is a good thing. I think it's a good thing to give up space. Now, the less good and part of my personality wants to be known as an exceptional writer, as an exceptional teacher, as a very good citizen, a very good and a very good friend and a very good family member, and a person of grand jolly.
Yes.
And joy.
Yes, indeed.
And hey, I sort of got that.
You definitely got that. The moment you walked in, I was like, okay, that energy is going to be good. So I love it. I love it. Well, I'll tell you this. I definitely remember you. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will as a flower boy, and that you have taken your life and you've given us so much. You have definitely left your mark in literature. And so even if they remember your name, they'll be able to read. And I don't think there's anything that's going anywhere. And so that's going to stay in history. And so I just want to thank you for taking time today to speak with me.
You're most welcome.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And continue doing you. And when you go to New York, I hope it's amazing. I hope it's some of the best time in your life. And the best is yet to come.
I'd send it right back at you.
Thank you so much.